Welcome to the Uplifting Podcast. On today's podcast, we have Nathalie Champion, who is crushing the real estate game out here in Hawaii. We are going to learn why owning your worth should come before owning a home.
On today's episode, Nathalie talks about the importance of community and creating a safe space for women to openly share their story. So let's get into the episode. Welcome to the Uplifting Podcast with your hosts, Randy and Catherine.
This is a space for powerful women to share their story and to be real and raw about the truth of living your life's purpose.
Any topic is fair game. We check gossip at the door so we can focus on building community and collaboration.
This podcast will help you discover your individual power and give you the tools to live your most uplifted life.
So let's find out what's uplifting you today. So welcome to the Uplifting Podcast. Today we have Nathalie Champion on the podcast. And Nathalie is a realtor focused on coaching people through one of the most vulnerable and difficult experiences of purchasing a home. And she is smashing the limiting beliefs that surround what it takes to own a home and is empowering women to become homeowners. And she runs the Sparked in Honolulu group, and which is you can explain it a little bit more probably later, Nathalie, but it's an authentic relationship game. And she also is a member of Women Speak and has such a powerful voice and message to share with the world. So thank you, Nathalie, for being here.
Welcome, Nathalie.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with both of you.
So for those of you who don't know, Nathalie and I know one another through Women Speak, which is a public speaking group specifically for women. So that's how her and I met. And we kind of just want to dive right into just learning more about your story, Nathalie. So can you tell us a little bit about, what got you to becoming a realtor and what got you to where you are today?
Absolutely. So I, even as a child, was always kind of a seeker, wondering what my purpose was, why I had incarnated. I was a super weird kid. And I moved from major to major until finally I realized I needed to graduate. I couldn't be a lifelong student it was too expensive. So I got my degree in psychology and worked up in Alaska with adults and kids with developmental disabilities. I loved that. I did not love the cold. So I I found a spiritual teacher, got on a spiritual path, and then headed over to Santa Fe, where I worked in the art industry. I worked at an art gallery for about 12 years, and I loved the funkiness of artists, and I loved being able to be essentially their mouthpiece, because a lot of them were not super socially adept. So I took it upon myself to connect people with what the artist was trying to convey. And that felt good to me, to essentially be the agent for that artist in dealing with the public. And when I moved here, I realized that there just wasn't that much of an art market that would make something like that sustainable here. Santa Fe is an art destination. Honolulu is not. So I thought to myself, okay, what can I do that will capture my strengths of nurturing and wanting to represent people, especially with a high level of care, because art is discretionary. And so the people that purchase it expect a high level of professionalism and service. And for me, real estate was a perfect fit because it allowed me to take that attentiveness and the need of people to just be educated through the process, and allow me to nurture them and run with it. So I really enjoyed that.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then I guess specifically with women,
Mm-hmm.
how does that help women in this sense? And like, why specifically women as far as targeting your market for a realtor and all that fun stuff?
Absolutely. So that wasn't my deliberate, conscious target initially, but I am a strong woman, and like attracts like. And I found myself connecting with other strong women. And I don't know that a lot of people know, but typically if it's not a couple purchasing real estate, it's a woman. Women tend to buy more real estate as single people than men do. I know, it's very surprising, but sometimes that can be daunting in a place like Hawaii, where home expenses are unusually high compared to the rest of the country. And so my ease and resonance has always been in connecting with women, especially here. I feel like there's a lot of really cool and interesting women that I have connected with on the island, and it just was a natural progression to then try to match these women with properties that would be a good fit for them individually and for them and their partner if they were in a partnership. Because I also work with single men, but mostly it's women and strong women and their partners. So yeah, that just manifested as a result of my genuine just meshing with women in general.
Yeah. And so what are some of the struggles that you see specifically for women when it comes to trying to, own a home, or first time, if they're a first time home buyer, maybe specifically, or even just for women in general in this process of owning a home? What are some of those struggles that you see?
So there's a couple things which I have observed in working with women, and one of them is that women tend to get paid less, and so that makes a big difference as you're looking for property here. It narrows what you can afford significantly, and so one of the things that I like doing to overcome that pay differential is finding the best bang for the buck for my clients, so that they can go into something that may need a little bit of sweat equity or something, but it's in a good and safe neighborhood, and they can do the work themselves and come out on top. I think that's super important. Another thing that I think women tend to be a little bit less confrontational by nature, and sometimes that works against you when you're negotiating for what is right. And thirdly, I think women sometimes we don't value ourselves in the same way that men do. And this is obviously a gross generalization, but I have seen it in my life. I've seen it in the lives of other women. And at this point in my life, I'm valuing myself more. And by doing that, I help other women recognize their own worth and their own value. And I advocate for them fiercely as though it was my own money.
And that kind of goes into my next question of how directly are you empowering these women? Like, how directly are you saying these types of things to your clients?
I say it all the time. And it doesn't matter if people are trying to buy property or if they're selling property, I really think it's important for women to recognize the intrinsic value that they bring to the table, because ultimately real estate is not necessarily competitive, it's collaborative. And women shine when it comes to collaboration, because that's what I do. I love the, like, let's find a place where we are all feeling whole. We're all coming out where we've got what we want. I don't think it's great negotiation where everybody feels bad because everybody feels like they didn't get what they wanted. I think it's the opposite. Everybody feels like they got what they should have gotten. Yeah.
And why do you think as women we really struggle to fight for our worth, or even really understand our worth?
Mm-hmm.
What do you believe is behind that?
I think that it tends to be passed along. I have a brilliant and beautiful mother, and she has a blog called The Happiest Woman I Know. And there's a sweetness to that, but there's also a reality that she has struggled in her life, and she'll keep it private and she'll keep it closed. But I've seen that struggle, and my sisters have seen that struggle. I am the oldest of 4 girls, so we all have the heredity of the women that raise us. And if you're either trying to be a better version of your mom, or you are rebelling completely from who your mom was, there typically isn't a big middle road with that. So for me, it's about recognizing programming and overcoming it.
And you're talking about your mom's struggles. How do you think your mom's struggles affected you growing up? Like, what did your struggles look like, especially in relation to maybe what she had gone through?
Mm-hmm. So my father had an affair with his secretary. And so my youngest sister was a result of that affair. And that was really something that profoundly affected everybody in my family. And my parents are still together, and it took a lot of love and communication and undoing and redoing for there to be harmony there. And really, my youngest sister, Vanessa, ended up living with my mom and my dad in their home in Maui for, I believe, 2 years, because she was in Venezuela. And it was so bad there that my mom was like, this cannot be. So she welcomed Vanessa into her home. And to see that level of grace and forgiveness and class, to me, it gives me chicken skin just thinking about it, because that is who I want to be. I want to be that kind of like clear and loving and accepting of people, and transcend my own ego kind of contraction around how it thinks things should be. So to me, my relationship with my mom is one of just, I'm so inspired by her. I think that she's living a life that is inspiring, and I feel very grateful to be her daughter. Yeah.
Wow, there's so many things to unpack in just that story.
I can't even believe that. That's like,
yeah,
that's some forgiveness right there.
Huge. It's huge. And there's but it just goes to show that we all have the power to update our imagery and change our narrative and live the life that we want to live, that has nothing to do with what anybody else's perception of good and bad is.
Yeah, because I think in so many circumstances, somebody would have looked at an affair like that, right? And wouldn't have been able to get past that, you know, mistake, and really allowing that to define the relationship, right? Instead of understanding the person and really the forgiveness, which I think so many of us struggle with, is that forgiveness. How did these circumstances really shape who you are, you know, with seeing this as a child? And have you been able to embrace your sister, that, you know?
Yeah, very much so. So she is now 18 and I'm 42. So this happened when I was an adult, you know, a young adult, but still an adult. And I from the get-go loved her because she what happened was perfect. It had to happen. I have a sister as a result of it who's an amazing, amazing woman, and I'm so glad to have her in my life. And I really appreciate the fact that, like, Randy, you've said, you know, you are perfect just the way you are. And I believe that in the deepest core of my being. And as such, I recognize there's no mistakes. There's just karma, there's karmic patterns, there's missing marks, and then refining who we are based on what we want to create in our lives.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's so inspiring. It's interesting that she was born as you were already into your adulthood, you know? Mm-hmm. You said you had other siblings, yes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm the oldest, and I've got a middle sister, Melissa, and to Tanya. We were all three. We all grew up together in the same household with my mom.
What was that growing up like with your mother?
She was a social butterfly. She was very community based, and she would have these amazing parties. I'm first generation American. My parents are Haitian. And there was always music and dancing and celebration in our households growing up. And that is something that I would absolutely like to have more of in my life, because it's something that was so core to me as a child. And I think that helped me kind of slide into creating, well, not creating, but going into taking over the sparked circle that Vivian Best had started, and building that kind of community of women who want to relate to each other authentically and give each other the space to share our stories. Mm-hmm. So that was a good base for that creation.
Absolutely. So I know that sharing your story is very important to you, and just, you know, creating safe spaces for women to share their story as well. So can you tell us a little bit about that, and how sharing your story and really owning your story has brought you to where you are today?
Yeah. Thank you, Randy. It has not been easy for me to be in a place of sharing my story. First, because I was like, nobody cares. Nobody wants to hear my life, like whatever. And as real or false as that is, it was my story, until I realized that while my story is interesting, everybody has an amazing story. And as I recognized that more and more, I was like, I think that a lot more people think the way that I think. Nobody cares. Nobody wants to hear their story. And that's not true. I mean, that's how we build community. That's how we build friendships. And that is so precious to me. And I think it's precious to a lot of the other women that come and participate in things like Woman Speak or Sparked, or even my clients who are looking at buying property and they've got their narrative of how they want things to be, and they are afraid and they are vulnerable, and it gives us the space to explore what it is we're all trying to create.
So do you think it was kind of that influence from your mother and that really tie into community that really drove you sparked into Women Speak? Was there something else that influenced you in that decision as well?
I think that my mom had a big part to play with in that, and I also think that being friends with somebody like Vivian, who is such a classic extrovert, gave me kind of a new courage to get out of my own head and stop over analyzing everything to death and just ask for what I wanted. I mean, it sounds so simple, but it really is so profoundly the seed from which everything manifests, because too often we rely on other people's psychic abilities to try to figure out what it is we are wanting from them. And then we get frustrated, they get frustrated, nobody is happy. So having that clarification is...
Are those your birds?
No, that is my cat who is
Nathalie mentioned before that her birds might make noise, so just to let everyone know, if you hear a strange noise, some animals.
It's my menagerie. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Oh yes. So, why do you think so many women struggle to really live into their life's purpose and really own their story and what they've been through? Why do you think we struggle with that?
For me, it comes down to a sense of self-worth, which translated to, am I wanted in this dialogue? Is my opinion even wanted in this? And I think too often, when we're dealing with things in work, it tends to be a little bit more patriarchal, which is like, it's everybody for themselves, speak up, or you won't get heard. And if you've got something that you're a little bit shy about saying, but you kind of mention it to somebody else, they say it and they get the credit, so I'm over it. And I think that it's important for us as women to do something which I heard about in Barack Obama's cabinet, which is if a woman had something to say and they said it, another woman would say, yes, like Nathalie said this. And then but it was like, let's give credence and validity to the person who came up with it. Not necessarily that that's that important, but in another sense, it kind of is, because then you're like, I have something to say and people want to hear what I'm saying, and that's how we kind of bring each other up, I think.
It's true. I actually want to backtrack a little bit because we've touched on Spark, but we haven't really dove into it. Dive. Hi, English.
Divin.
Words
are hard.
Words are hard.
I guess just for those who don't know what Spark is, can you give us an overview and a detailed overview of what that is?
Absolutely. It's this wonderful interactive game where a group of women, it can be about 12 or so, sometimes more, sometimes less, but we all gather around and we have a little wand that the person who has the wand gets to spin a spinner, and it'll fall on a category that is something like opportunity, gratitude, love, passion, happiness, adventure, one of those, inspiration. and you pick a card, and it tells you, like, if there's a question, and you can answer it yourself, or sometimes it's a group question to be answered. And these questions and answers and activities that these cards prompt us to do are just, they're so lovely, and it's so community building, and it does so in such a great way, because it's not like, where do you work? It's more like, what this month has inspired you the most? You know, like something that is meaty and of substance. And it gives you a chance to find that, to find your voice, and to share your experience with other women who are listening, who are not on their phones texting people or anything like that. They're present and they're listening. And that feeling is so, it's so heart opening, and it's getting increasingly rare in this day and age. And I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to be able to gather women together in this safe space where we all say that we're going to keep whatever happens in this circle confidential. So it's a safe space where we're all letting people share their experience and be vulnerable up to the point where they want to be, and be heard.
If I may ask a follow-up question, how did you even get involved in Sparked? How did this even come into your vision?
Yeah, so that was my friend Vivian, who is a powerhouse now in Austin, but was a powerhouse here in Honolulu. And her heart's desire was in creating spaces for people to gather and build community. And she's wonderful at doing that. And she saw this game on Kickstarter and bought it and played it and had this whole networking thing based around it, and started a Facebook page that would show when games were going on. And then when she left, she started one in Austin, and I took over the Facebook page that she'd started here. And then I created a Facebook group for other people to post their Sparked games all over, not only Oahu, but the neighbor islands.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's, you know, I've played Sparked, and it's such a fun game, and something that always comes up whenever I've played the game with other people is that they've never really asked themselves, a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people say that they've never really asked themselves these types of really, you know, difficult and very insightful questions. And can you talk a little bit about that, and maybe the power behind, you know, asking the powerful questions and the difficult questions, and diving deeper than surface level? Because I think so often we just keep things at surface level, but the power is in something deeper. Yeah.
Yeah. For me, I tend to be introverted, and as a measure of self-preservation, I realized that questions will lead to conversation, and sometimes I feel like I don't have the energy to go into real in-depth conversations. But you know what I mean? So for this, there is it's just so different, because it's questions that help you unpack who you truly are, and who you truly want to be, and what your ideals are, and what it is you are trying to create in your life. And it opens doorways that I think, if given the chance, our minds and egos would just kind of keep closed, because they're kind of mechanical entities that are just like, put this widget over here and done. You know, it's popping out of being on autopilot and surfacing into this moment, which is where everything manifests. And it gives people an opportunity to actually do that in a safe and loving environment. And I think that we all could use more of that.
Absolutely, because I think without asking yourself those difficult questions, like you said, you can't really discover who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I truly believe that that's what this life is all about, is really getting in touch with our true selves, because I truly believe that we had it when we were kids.
Yes.
We had that authenticity. You know, we belonged to ourselves. We really didn't have that fear of what other people would think of us. And somehow along the way, we lost that. You know, so I really truly believe that our lives is about coming back to that and coming back to who we truly are. But if we don't ask ourselves those difficult questions, which a lot of times can elicit difficult emotions, right? That so often we try to avoid, but it's only through exploring our darkness that we can see the power of our light. And so I truly believe that. So I just, I want to thank you, Nathalie, for giving women this safe space to share their voice and to allow their voices to be heard. Because like you said, we just need so much more of that.
I totally agree. And I absolutely agree with you, Randy, that those difficult emotions, suppressing them is not going to do anything except have it manifest in dis-ease in another way. And to really have the courage, willingness, and space to unpack those difficult feelings of guilt or shame or low self-worth and look at them, it enables us to change our inner monologue. It enables us to see ourselves more like the child that we were, with that immediacy and that enthusiasm and that sincere joy, because there's no time. Kids don't care what you think about them.
Mm-hmm.
There's no time for that.
Yeah, and you touched on that time piece. It's just like, there is no time. Like the only moment we have is right now. And so I really believe we need to live our lives with a sense of urgency.
Yeah, I agree. We say, if I die, as though there's an alternative.
Right.
All gone down. Sorry.
That's right. So are we living our best life here and now? That's the question.
Something that came to me, I'm kind of curious about, you touched on like your idea of worth, like you as a general woman, but this idea of worth and value. And what do you think was most valuable to you in overcoming these ideologies of not being good enough or not feeling worthy enough?
Well, I've been on the same spiritual path for about 18 years. And I think just having some kind of spiritual practice of either meditation or contemplation or any kind of opportunity to get out of the rut of mind's agenda and come back into like your breath and the stillness and check in with yourself. I think that those things are essential in ascending out of old and dead images that we carry of who we think we are.
Absolutely. I love that. So before we end, I just want to ask if there's any questions that we haven't asked or things that you would like to talk about, or maybe a question that you wish more people would ask you before, we ask our final question.
Okay. One question that I think would be so helpful for people to ask is, what do you want? Because too often we give that power to something outside of ourselves, and then we're disappointed with the effects. Too often we don't actually embrace the awesomeness that question can bring into our lives, for fear that what we're asking for is too big. And we live a smaller life and the world is smaller as a result.
That's amazing. And then I guess our final question is, what are 3 things that you can recommend for women right now to take action to uplift their lives?
Continue to build community. Don't isolate yourself. And I know that that can be challenging, especially if you have children or a household that you're taking care of. And I think that it's essential that we as women find each other, because it is so nourishing. And that is something that I learned later in life. I was always a tomboy, and I always felt more comfortable with guys as a child and growing up, because they were much more clear in my experience. If someone was mad at me and it was a boy, I knew it. And with a girl, I was like, are you mad? Or
Are we cool?
Right. And so I guess that would lead me to my third thing, which is, don't be afraid of your emotions. Don't be afraid of expressing your emotions, and owning them, so that people can really understand where it is you're coming from. Because yes, emotions can be messy and volatile, but honor them and let them move through, and you can create a space of authenticity as a result of that.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Oh, well, I'm sure everyone is just feeling so inspired and uplifted after listening to this interview. So where can people connect with you? Maybe, find out more about Sparked.
Buy a home from you?
Yeah. Give everybody all the details on how to connect with you.
Sure. So I'm on Facebook and Instagram. My website for property is NathalieChampion.com. For Sparked, it is either the Sparked in Honolulu page or Sparked in Hawaii group.
And that's on Facebook, right?
Those both are on Facebook, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nathalie. It was such a pleasure, and we cannot wait for everyone to hear this episode and connect with you and really just take what they have learned from this. I know I feel more uplifted and inspired, and so we just hope that everyone who is listening to this just takes action to pursue their dreams and live their best life.
Me too.
Thank you so much.
Both. Thank you both for creating this.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing a piece of your day with us.
Please rate and subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you're listening to us on.
To continue the conversation, follow Catherine and Randy on social media. Our links are listed in the show notes.
We can't wait to share another powerful story with you next week. And until then,
stay uplifted.